May hapon. O mga tuwag patigali may hapon. O lagi. What is justice? Justice is giving everyone their due, what they deserve. Again, they ask themselves, what is the question? Do the future generations deserve the kind of earth we are leaving behind? There are two defining issues of the 21st century. The first is the climate crisis that is unraveling everything about the Earth's web of life. And number two, which you, upon the suggestion of Emily, is the large amount of weaponry that we have in our arsenals that can blow up the entire humanity, that can blow up the entire world, the entire Earth, what, 20 times over? How many times do we have to blow it up? So, and it will not only blow it up once, it will contaminate for thousands and thousands of years. In the next 10 years, 20 years, if we're still around, our generation will be in rocking chairs, if not looking at the daisies, pushing up the daisies. But you have the time, and you also have the facility of modern technology, that you can get in touch with anyone all over the world with the punch of a simple button. Be it remembered, my friends, that the power does not reside in the stage, in governments. It does not reside in the people in power. As one Egyptian activist said, the power of the people, you, each and every one of you, the power of the people is more powerful than the people in power. Remember that.
All rise. The National Court of Justice is now in session. President Marilyn Yap and the Honorable Judges David Foreman, Emily Gayard, Mahito Shindu, and Nicholas Robinson presiding. The question before the court is the matter concerning the clarification of obligations of states regarding the nuclear technology and weapons disarmament in the 21st century.
Under international law, the general rule is that under Article 2, subparagraph 4 of the United Nations Charter, states in their relations with other states must refrain from using threat or use of force against the political independence and territorial sovereignty of another states. Therefore, Your Excellencies, Article 51, which contains the provision allowing the use of self-defense, is an exception to the general rule. And under international law, exceptions to the general rule must be strictly construed. The UNGA passed Resolution 1653, declaring the illegality of the use of nuclear weapons. This was agreed to by 55 states coming from communist and third world countries. 20 states voted against it, and 26 abstained, coming from Latin America. And Your Excellencies, Latin America today is already a nuclear-free zone country. This shows, Your Excellency, that there is really a recognition in the international community that the prohibition on the use of nuclear weapons is really a grave concern. Your Excellencies, also, during the 497th plenary meeting of the United Nations General Assembly, the total prohibition on the manufacture of nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction have been adopted unanimously by states parties. Your Excellencies, we therefore ask that this court find that the prohibition on the use of nuclear weapons has indeed become a customary norm.
You mentioned about protecting the environment. I'd like you to consider for a bit that if it were protecting the state, then it could include a self-defense, protecting the environment, and that could very well be a good argument for advancing the nuclear disarmament as customary law, because always every state would acknowledge that indeed they all have the responsibility to protect their environment, and in a manner of speaking, it expands the concept of self-defense to include the environment itself, and that would mean it's a responsibility for everyone who's present, who's still around or still alive, to address that, so that the other generations or future generations can live.
Yes, Your Excellency. Indeed, self-defense may include protection of the environment, not only its own people. However, self-defense by using nuclear weapons would be contrary to its very purpose, because by using nuclear technology, it would also affect the environment of other states. And in that context, Your Excellency, the state using this nuclear weapon is, aside from the fact that they are in that context protecting their environment, they are also harming the environment of other states. So therefore, Your Excellency, we respectfully submit that use of nuclear technology as self-defense cannot be justified.
In other words, the means does not or do not justify the ends.
Last Tuesday, Cecile and I met hibakushas of the first, second, and third generations. It was in France, and it struck us really much. So these survivors from Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombs are traveling the world on the peace boat to tell their stories. They are the ones promoting peace in the 21st century because they know what apocalypse after war would mean. They are the one we want to plead for today. We, as humans, have made choices. It has been a while since some have chosen to use nuclear weapons as a tool for showing their power. Some others chose to base their entire energy production on nuclear power plants. Others have chosen not to do anything with uranium. They chose different paths. At that time, the decision makers were not necessarily aware of the consequences of these choices. Now we know. We know they do not trigger the same outcomes. Some appeared to create uncontrollable situations. Uncertainty, danger, threat are the words which best qualify nuclear weapons and technology. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chelyabinsk, Chernobyl, Fukushima. What is next? Those were the results of choices, more or less predictable, but still choices.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, today there are enough tools in international law to defend future generations against nuclear weapons and nuclear technologies. First, international law recognizes the principle of non-harmful use of the national territory. When a nuclear disaster occurs, it is obvious that the use of nuclear have consequences throughout and beyond national boundaries. Because of the very nature of nuclear technologies, the law cannot prevent the risk triggered by potential nuclear disasters. It does not respect as well the precautionary principle. According to some people, nuclear risks are uncertain. The precautionary principle would be sufficient to tackle the issue of nuclear. But we argue that the principle of prevention must apply when it comes to nuclear technologies. Because once again, we know what are the consequences.
You're aligned with the arguments of the non-nuclear weapon states, only that you bring the interests of civil society and NGOs, right?
Yes.
For the two of you, or the two groups, you would espouse and you would really advocate towards total nuclear disarmament. Yes. How do you consider your approach? Is it the same approach, or would it be different as to how you would proceed towards that end?
I believe the only difference is the stages we have. So we are representing civil societies and the non-nuclear states are taking the path we want all states to take. So of course they are our allies. But well, we've heard before that the power of the people is more powerful than the people in power, so that's why we're here.
Spoken like Attorney Oposa.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
It is premature to claim that nuclear weapon states have violated their treaty law obligations, where not only was there no definitive time of which they are required to comply, but also there is an ongoing negotiation on the prohibition of nuclear weapons. This is also an indication that the so-called obligation of states to disarm is not a customary norm, and a treaty is necessary to make it binding. In general, it is our position that we are committed to the creation of a nuclear-free world. However, until there is global disarmament, nuclear weapon states will maintain an effective and secure arsenal. This brings me to my second argument, that the possession of nuclear weapons is not prohibited under customary international law, and in the advisory opinion on the legalities of nuclear weapons, this court even acknowledged the practice of a large number of states in the international community of the policy of deterrence. Moreover, in the asylums case, Your Excellencies, what prevented the creation of a customary norm was not the limited number of state practice, but rather the major inconsistencies present in state practice. And in this case, Your Excellencies, there are major inconsistencies like in nuclear free zones treaty, even member states acknowledges their reservations to use nuclear weapons in different instances. We believe that the possession of nuclear weapons is not a tool of aggression, but rather a tool of diplomatic means. Moreover, under environmental law, we acknowledge our obligation not to cause transboundary harm and the prevention principle.
It seems to me, even though you view it as a temporary activity, the mutually assured destruction means that a country like Bangladesh could want to have a weapon because India has one, and that neighbors are not equally deterred when some of the neighbors don't have these weapons. And would not a decision of this court, as the first agent and the second agents argued, help those negotiations along if we were to say that mutually assured destruction is indeed mad and that it's not supported by human rights law?
Can you clarify your question, Your Excellency?
Yes. Since you say the deterrence is a temporary phenomenon until we have a total test ban, why should not this court find that that temporary situation violates human rights, therefore should not continue?
There's no human rights violation, Your Excellency, because it is similar in nature to the use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes, because actually there is no injured individual, there is no injured combatants, and there is no injured environment as far as possession of nuclear weapons is concerned, Your Excellency.
Congratulations.